Hi, thank you for joining me today. I'm going to give it a couple minutes just to make sure that everyone can get settled in before we begin the presentation. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining me here today. My name is Claire Burke, and I'm a Career Services Associate with Employment Boost. And today what we're going to be doing is talking over some resume writing best practices and how to best market yourself. And as you know, in these unprecedented times, the job market has changed and it's become flooded. So it's more important than ever to make sure that your resume is standing out among a sea of candidates. So before we get started talking about tips and tricks on how to make your resume, best reflect your interests and goals, I wanted to take a moment to talk about who we are and what we do. So Employment Boost is a full-service outplacement, career coaching, and resume writing firm. We have offices across the U.S., and our services are built on over a decade of career services experience. We are actually the nation's top professional executive resume writing service, and our team of career coaches have backgrounds in headhunting, recruiting, and executive search. So that's a really great resource that we work with to make sure that our insights are informed by real-time dynamics and analysis of what the hiring market is looking like on a daily basis. Employment Boost is also a subsidiary of Heavyhitter Holdings. We've got quite a few brands that we work with. As you can see here, a lot of them are recruiting firms and executive search firms. So that's another great resource that we keep in mind as we create our resumes. We make sure to consult heavily with our in-house research and recruiting firms so that we know exactly what the job market is looking like and how to best make our clients' resumes stand out. So now that we've gone over who we are, let's go over the agenda for this presentation. So we're going to start out by breaking down a resume from head to toe, and also going over why it's important to understand these best practices. Next, we'll go over some tips and common mistakes that we see a lot. We offer a free resume evaluation service on our Employment Boost website, and as we go through them, we notice some trends. So we'll be going over mistakes and what you should do instead to make sure that your resume is performing the best it can. Finally, we'll go over any questions and answers that you may have about resumes, about the presentation, or about us. So before you begin writing your resume, it's really important to understand who and what will be reading it. Knowing your audience is really key here. And as you can see, the people that are typically overseeing the hiring process are supervisors, HR managers, talent acquisition specialists, and recruiters. And these are going to be the people that are overlooking your resume and deciding whether or not to move you forward in the interview process. But before your resume even gets to one of these people, it actually goes through an applicant tracking system, or ATS. Most of the time, they will go through that before a human being ever even reads it. So it's really important to understand how that factors in and how to optimize your resume to perform well in those databases. If your resume isn't set up correctly, if there's strange formatting, anything that can make it difficult for the ATS to parse through the information on the document, doesn't matter if you're the perfect candidate for the job, your resume will not reach a human being to be read at the end of the day. So the ATS is a really important player here. You're not only, as you write it, you don't only want to appeal to the human eye and tell your story for people, you want to make sure that you are covering that digital aspect and how that plays into the hiring process. So we know that applicant tracking systems are crucial when it comes to creating your resume, understanding how the ATS parses it, understanding how to best make sure your resume can be scanned properly by the ATS. Now let's talk a little bit more about what applicant tracking systems really are. ATSs are electronic databases that store resumes. When you submit your resume online, it goes straight to the ATS, and from there, these people, supervisors, recruiters, hiring managers, will input search terms within the ATS to narrow down the candidate pool. These search terms are really important, and they're something that we're going to be talking about a lot today. Think of it like this. If you go into Google, you input a search term to get the results you want. It's very similar to the ATS, except for the recruiters and hiring professionals will be inputting terms relevant to the position that is open and that you have submitted your job application to. A great place to find out what these keywords are and how to make sure that you can include them in your document is to go through the job description itself and notice trends in what words they're using. If you notice that there is a big emphasis on project management, for example, there's a good bet that project management is going to be one of those terms that these hiring professionals are searching for in the documents. It's important to understand that when it comes to these key terms, they're not all weighed equally. Frequency, placement, and boldness are all factors that play into how heavily your resume is weighed and how important those search terms are. So the more frequently you're using those keywords or buzzwords, the more likely it is that the ATS is going to place your resume at a higher value than one that is not using them as frequently. Placement, again, is a big factor. Words used at the top of the resume carry more value than those at the bottom. So it's really important to understand the dynamics of spacing, where to put words, and how to best show your experience in that way as well. Bolding is another thing that you can do to increase the value of the resume within the ATS. Words that are bolded carry more weight than those that are not. ATSs also scan for more administrative information like location. A great example of that would be geofiltering. Education and certifications as well, to make sure that these candidates hit the qualifications outlined in the job description. So it's really important, again, to understand that you're not just writing for people. The content of your resume should be engaging, it should be dynamic, and it should show who you are so that a hiring professional can see that when they read it. But you also need to make sure that the way that you are placing this information, the way you're formatting it, is appropriate so that the ATS can properly parse through and scan for those keywords. We have a stat here that 75% of qualified job applicants are rejected due to seemingly inconsequential reasons like formatting, which is huge. It plays a very big role. And it's important to understand as well here that graphics and images are not the key to success. They can make it hard for the ATS to parse through your information. And if it can't read the words that it's looking for, then it won't be able to select your resume. So now let's talk about some proper formatting and how to format your resume in a way that is scannable by the ATS. Your resume should be as visually efficient as possible. We have an example here. As you can see, there is a good amount of text, but there's also a good amount of white space to balance it out. It's also clearly marked and labeled and easy to read. You can see each section has its own title. You know what you're looking at when you look at it. Some best practices that we recommend is always limiting the resume to around 400 words per page, and never use a resume that is more than 2 pages. It should be 1 to 2, depending on how much experience that you have. The exception to this rule would be with academic CVs or federal resumes, but for a standard resume, you don't want to exceed 2 pages. You should also avoid the use of colors, text boxes, tables, graphics, anything like that. Again, this is primarily a function of the ATS, making sure that it can appropriately scan the language in your resume. But with colors especially, there's a human element as well. We all have internal biases, whether we know it or not. For example, maybe you used orange font in your header, but the hiring professional that is overlooking your resume might hate orange. Whether they know it, that will color the way that they see your candidacy. So be sure to keep it as neutral and professional as possible. And again, avoiding any graphics or text boxes that will hinder the way the ATS can scan through your information. So now let's talk about the resume summary. Supervisors and hiring professionals only have about 8 to 12 seconds to review a resume before deciding whether or not to move a candidate forward in the hiring process. So it's really important to make sure that the summary is right. It's the first thing on the page, it's the first thing that supervisors will see. So make sure that you're using it to show your overarching accomplishments, skills, talents, all of that, and give an overview of who you are as a professional. This is also a great place for keyword optimization. As I mentioned earlier, words that are at the top of the resume carry more value than those at the bottom. So you can really use this space at the top to include those terms that you see in the job descriptions that you're looking at. You can also use the job title to declare interest in a role or to showcase what you currently do. It depends on the situation and what you're looking for. And then also be sure to keep the summary short and succinct. Again, only 8 to 12 seconds to review a resume. So you want to make sure that it's as efficient as possible and shows your skills in a concise way. Again, focus on the job description here. Use skills that the department is looking for in your summary so that you get that keyword value. So now that we've gone over the summary, let's move on to the content of the resume itself, or the body of the resume. You want to make sure that each bullet addresses an accomplishment or a responsibility, but it is important here to show the achievements that you've made. Highlight different aspects of your skill sets, right? You want to show how you did what you did. And especially keeping it accomplish-driven and accomplish-based can help your resume stand out more. You should also use action verbs to start each bullet. Really strong dynamic language here is a great way to give a little bit more energy to your resume, make it a little bit more engaging to read, but it also can really show that you are making the impact, that you have done these things, and that you are a valuable asset because of your accomplishments, right? You should also use as many quantitative metrics as possible. If you have any numbers tied to your performance, if you can look over previous performance reviews, see if there's any metrics there, just to really quantify the information here and provide a little bit more context and strengthen those bullets, right? When it comes to the body of the resume, you want to make sure that you're showing as smooth of a timeline as you possibly can. But be consistent about presentation. So for example, we have an example here, and that shows both months and years of tenure at each role. You don't have to use months, but if you do, make sure that you're using them for every role. You really want to be consistent, and that's something that we're going to talk about a lot, but it really is important. Make sure that if you make a formatting choice in one job, make that in your other jobs. You should also be specific about the locations of your positions, just to provide a little bit more of a geographical framework for the manager so they understand, where you have been in the past. And then again, consistency. Try to stagger the font sizes if you can. As you can see in this example, we have the name of the company, a larger font and bolded. We have the job title, a little bit smaller, but still larger than the text itself, and italicized. This is a great way to improve the readability of your document. It can help break up the page. If you've seen resumes that are just one size font, no bolding, it can sometimes look like a wall of text, and we want to avoid that again and make it as easy to read for recruiters as possible. So now let's go over education and formalities, or what would typically be at the bottom of the resume. You need to be strategic about where you place your education. It's kind of a case-by-case basis, and it depends on the level of experience you have. If you are a professional who's been working in a professional capacity for over 5 years or so, we recommend moving the education to the bottom of the resume. Whereas if you're very entry level, it can be a good idea to put it at the top. The general rule here is the longer you've been out of school, the less important it becomes on the resume. So be sure to think about how you want to frame that and how specific you want to get. And we'll go over in a little bit an example of a highly specific education section that would be appropriate for an entry-level candidate. Again, you want to be consistent about how you format the end of the resume. You can see that we've left aligned the titles here. You don't have to do that, but if you do make a formatting choice, again, stick with it. Again, for readability here. And then after listing your education, think about other opportunities that you've had, any certifications, professional development, training, awards, anything like that can add value to the resume and show that you are continuously driving to improve your skills. You can also include technical proficiencies, as you see here, another great way to boost keyword value, but also show that you have those proficiencies in relevant softwares and technologies. So now let's dive into an example of a highly specific education section. And like I said, this would most likely be appropriate for a very entry-level candidate who does not have much professional experience. And fleshing out your education is a great way to make up for that and to show that even though you might not have professional experience, you've developed these skills in school and you can really highlight that. So as you can see, we have a list of coursework that this person has taken, and that's a great way to get keyword value as well. Think about the courses that you've taken that are relevant to the jobs that you're pursuing and include those. Projects as well, and then student involvement. These can all be great things in a really highly specific education section to include to show your skill sets. So now let's go over some common resume mistakes that we see. One of them being stating an objective, not a summary. And that's something that we see a lot. The objective statement has fallen by the wayside over the past few years in favor of the professional summary. The professional summary is great for all of the reasons we discussed earlier, but also, it shows what you have done. Objectives show what you want to do, but you can really provide a concrete overview of your professional accomplishments and experiences with a summary. You also want to include, to avoid irrelevant information. So if it doesn't pertain to the types of roles that you're looking for, you don't need to include it. I think a lot of people want to put everything they've ever done on a resume, and that's just not the way it should be again. It should be an overview of your experience. You don't need to include anything that isn't immediately relevant or that doesn't show a skill that would be relevant or transferable. You also want to avoid any spelling or grammatical errors. Again, just make sure that the document is as professional as possible. You want to show that you have these good writing skills and that you'd be able to do that in a professional capacity as well. And then finally, avoid funky formatting here for reasons pertaining to the ATS, but also you want to make sure it's easy to read for a hiring professional as well. So stay away from anything strange or unprofessional when it comes to formatting. Some additional tips here. We do recommend including a technical proficiencies section. Again, that's a great way to get some keyword value in the document, and then also to show that you have worked with these softwares, you have experience with them if they're relevant to your next role. You should also highlight the most important projects you've worked on, but again, don't feel the need to include every project that you've ever done. You don't need to go too far into depth. Give an overview of the essentials, right? It's a resume, not a manifesto, so keep it a little bit more broad and you don't need to include everything. We also recommend keeping your resume up to date and including your new accomplishments and achievements as you make them. And this serves a couple of purposes. The first being it's motivational. When you continue to add new skills and accomplishments to your resume, it motivates you to learn more skills, right? And keep building out that repertoire. So make sure that you are consistently adding information to keep you motivated in the future. Keeping your resume up to date also means that you're ready for new opportunities as they come up. So even if you are comfortable in your current job and not actively searching, It's a good idea to make sure that your resume is always ready to be submitted, because you never know when your dream job opportunity comes up. So keep it up to date for that reason as well. A practical tip is to fill in any glaring resume gaps. And gaps can sometimes be perceived by hiring managers as a red flag. And it makes them wonder what you were doing, why you weren't employed. So fill those in as much as you can. We have an example here. Maybe you had to take some time off of work to care for a loved one. It's okay to put that you were doing that, right? It fills in that gap. And then also, there could be some really valuable transferable skills that you can use from that in a new role. So do your best to fill in recent gaps when you can. Another tip here, again, be relevant. You want to make sure that you're focusing on your latest and greatest accomplishments. The more recent achievements and the more recent experience that you have are most likely going to be the most relevant to the role versus experience that you had 20 years ago, for example. So be sure to really flesh out the content of your most recent roles, and you can condense or minimize earlier experience. And in fact, if your work history goes back too far, you might run the risk of ageism and exposing your age. So be sure to keep your resume to around the most recent 20 years or so, just to make sure that you're focusing on the relevant information that will help you in your job search. Again, with ageism, if your email address has your year of birth in it, see if you can create an alternate email specifically for the job search. And that can also be a great tip to make sure that everything is organized and that all of your job hunting information is in one centralized location. We also strongly recommend pursuing professional development and upgrading your skills. It's a very competitive job market, so make sure that you're constantly looking for opportunities to get a leg up and to gather new skills that are relevant to the roles that you're looking for, especially in industries that are rapidly advancing. Find out what programs are valued in your industry, see if there are any online classes that you can take or trainings, certifications, anything like that to refresh your skill set and gain new skills that are valuable. Another great opportunity here as well is to develop a social media presence. If you're not on social media, it can be a great place to network and connect with professionals in your industry and to take part in relevant conversations online. So we strongly recommend creating that digital footprint as well. Finally, we'll go over some tips and an activity to make the most of your skills and experience. And here we have a SWOT exercise. You can see that we have positive and negative internal and external forces, and these are all factors in your job hunt, and they can help determine whether or not it's successful. So for example, an internal positive aspect would be your strengths, the skills that you bring to the table, what you've been recommended and complimented on in performance reviews, anything that your colleagues have to say about your strengths. Start thinking about those. And then internal negative forces are your weaknesses. And again, this is a great place to bring in professional development. We all have areas that we can improve upon. So identify those and start brainstorming ways that you can improve those and turn them into strengths. Positive external forces are opportunities. Using the example, maybe your dream job opportunity opens up. That would be a positive external force. And then finally, negative external forces are threats to your success in the job search. So think about your previous performance appraisals. Think about what your colleagues and your managers have had to say about you. List out relevant skills and experience that you need for each job. That can be a great way to strategize on how to best format your document and on what skills to include. And again, this is a great place as well to go through the job descriptions and pick out the words that you're seeing a lot and the terms that seem to be popping up multiple times. Transferable skills as well here. Maybe you're looking to shift to a new industry. Think about the skills from your past that apply to that and write them out. Finally, think about the personal traits that make you unique. It's important to show your personality in your resume as well in a professional manner, but show the skills that only you have or the experience that only you can bring to the table. Maybe you're incredibly well-traveled. You can show that you bring a global perspective to things. So just think about those unique traits that you have that you can show in the document. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming and watching. We'll take a little bit of time now to answer any questions that you may have about resumes, about us, anything like that. All right. Well, if nobody has any questions, we can go ahead and wrap up here. But thank you again for joining me today. And please feel free to check out our website if you have any questions.